Hey, everybody, you ready to be a badass out there? Well, you're just in time. If you haven't drafted in your leagues yet, you're going to get a lot of help today. We're going to talk about risers and what they are and how they can help you be a badass out there and win your league. Now, some sad news. If you've already drafted, and I told y'all to wait, I hope none of y'all out there drafted Edwin Diaz. I almost feel like having a moment of silence. I'm saddened by his injury in the World Baseball Classic. Serious blow to the fantasy baseball world especially if, first of all, feel bad for the players and as a human being, an individual. He's lost for the season, a terrible blow to him and his family and the New York Mets, the entire country of Puerto Rico. But we got to move on in fantasy baseball. It's sad news. But hopefully, if you have drafted, you're not in that dilemma because he would have cost, around a third round pick if you were drafted here recently. So the folks out there had a lot of faith in Edwin Diaz. You made the right move at the time with the information you had. He was number one on my board as far as a relief pitcher. I was targeting him in certain situations. Him or what I had said earlier in draft strategies, a special edition was that there was only about 3 to 5 relievers going into this year that you can pretty much say are 30-plus save relief pitchers, closers, real closers, full-time closers, the traditional closer, what have you. And 2 of them have been lost this season. I mean, because a lot of people, we forget Liam Hendricks was one of those handful of closers, and he's been lost this year. I don't know if it's all year, but he's been lost for an unknown amount of time. So now 2 of them are off the board. So obviously the price and the value of those remaining solid top-of-the-line closers has really been reduced. Therefore, I believe, the value goes up. Therefore, you should start seeing them relievers in general, closers trend upward over the next week, 2 weeks before leading into the opening day. But we're going to talk about risers. What the hell are they? What the hell is he talking about? What is he making up in his mind today? Well, we're searching for upside. And I know if you've been listening out there to other podcasts, then you are well aware and you hear upside a lot. And they're looking for this and looking for that. It is time for you to grab hold of your team, take this riser thought and try to integrate it into your draft strategies, and let me know how that works out for you as well. Make sure you follow me on all my socials, anything that you're on, like Facebook. You can find me at BadAzz Fantasy Baseball. You can also find me on Twitter at Roto_Rudy. That's ROTO_RUDY. And you can always send in a chat from the live stream as well. And that's what I was trying to pull up earlier. Let me try it one more time and see what is going on. What's going on? What's going on? Man, I need somebody to come on the show and tell me what the hell to do here. Like, literally. So, it just doesn't show. There, it's showing up. It's showing live. Okay, maybe it's working now. I don't know. For some reason, it wants to start at the start instead of... There, now it's working. Hey, that's amazing. Hello. Is it late? I don't know. It is work. I'm amazed sometimes when technology works for me. I mean, I'm serious. Now it's talking. I got to mute that. Okay, that was freaking me out. Okay, so you can certainly join the chat, and I'm sorry if I'm just now getting on or what have you. I see somebody got on there. Looks like Error Z's. Hey, what's up, man? Error Z's. That's a cool name. I like that, man. Thanks for joining. We had have a little hiccup. If you know Rudy by now, or if you've ever checked into any of these or looked at my previous videos, you'll know I'm new to this arena as far as maneuvering, navigating through all this stuff. But I assure you, I'm getting better every time. So if you just tuned in today out there and you say, "Man, this guy sucks on the podcasting stuff," well, consider the information that's being put out, and is it valuable and helpful? Is it fun to talk about? Shit, come up with something positive, or come up with a question about fantasy baseball that you want to have answered. I mean, I'm game for all this stuff, because what I'm trying to do is build a community of like-minded people that love fantasy baseball. That's what I do. Hell, I ain't in it to making money or anything. That's good. You just got home from the draft today. Yeah. Hey, thanks. I appreciate that encouragement out there, Airzies. Hey, man, if you go to my Twitter or Facebook site and send me your address, tell me who your favorite team is. I'll send you a good little collection of. I'll throw some rookie cards and some baseball cards from your favorite team or player. Just let me know who it is. Give me an address, and I'll send that stuff out. Thanks for joining in. So we're gonna talk risers, because that's what the hell this is about. I always appreciate positive people that are trying to just generally be positive, you know. Let me open this up. I'm still trying to open these windows. When you have multiple windows, you guys that know computers and all this shit better than me will probably think that shouldn't be a problem. But hey, I'm retired, and sometimes shit is a problem. Okay, now I got everything cooking. So in the search for risers, what I did, I was searching for as many of the top 30 fantasy players that end with the highest in-season, the highest differential between their preseason fantasy rank and their performance over the course of the season. You're trying to identify, and this is not a hard and fast rule by any means. It is just a general concept to be organized, and I picked 30 because I'll talk specifically about some of these players that I did an assessment on at the end of last season as part of my after-action review at the end of each season. So we're looking for a group of about probably 30 fantasy players that are going to would make up what I would call risers. These difference makers, these ones that have such a differentiate from the median projections that are made about their performance coming up in the season, and the higher the differential at the finish at the end of the season, obviously the higher rated riser they are. They're super risers. I don't even know what the fuck to call them. Mega risers, but 30. It's not that many. Now you have risers on your team, or they're out there that you're able to draft and take a shot at, and you also have what I call steady eddies. These steady Eddies are going to deliver consistency. And a few seasonal statistical bumps will happen here and there, usually around their contract year. But in a general sense, these steady Eddies, you know, for a fan of baseball and fantasy baseball in particular, nothing about steady Eddie sounds exciting. I might even call it, fucking like boring and shit. Like seriously. So steady Eddies are not your sexy picks all the time, but again, they have their place, and I'll talk about that. So draft season's when you're the general manager, like I've spoken before about where you are in your own organizational structure, so to speak, and you got your general manager hat on, and it's probably the most important time, just like it is almost in real baseball life. The draft season or the free agency deadline and acquisitions made, trades, such, that's when that GM hat is most prominent and has its greatest effect on real baseball teams, and certainly is your most important step as a fantasy baseball manager at this point in the season. It's your chance to shine and get your team started and your season off right. And even though most of us play sports for fantasy sports for fun, that doesn't mean we're not competitive. I'm fucking competitive. I mean, I'm probably not going to go out there and run a 2-mile run against you anymore, you young vets out there that were once soldiers. But I did it once. Like that movie Mel Gibson was in, it said we were soldiers once and young. Those were good days, though. But on the draft, the general manager is really in the spotlight. And playing for fun, we're still, I think most of y'all out there are competitive to a certain extent, and that's why we're playing too. For the competition. Competition is fun. But my philosophy has been stated before. I've said it several times. Having fun is fun, but having fun and winning is funner. Yeah. And I'll tell you an analogy. The best analogy I can come up with to support that is if you have a hot date, that's great. It is great to have a hot date, even rhymes. But when you have a hot date and you get her in the sack, that's funner. Fuck yeah. It's all clear now, right? It's clear. Yeah, so having fun is fun, but having fun and winning is funner. And that's what we're trying to do. As a GM, you're going to set goals for the season, I hope. I hope you've already done that. But if you haven't, hey, set goals. Set goals now. Do it right now while you're listening to this. Take some notes or whatever. I'm not a fast talker. I'm not on this little stopwatch or whatever like some of these podcasts. And don't get me wrong, I'm not here to bash other podcasts. I'm just saying they're on time schedules and there's ceilings and floors and stuff to their operations because they're a professional operation. I feel like I'm a semi-pro operation. I'll refer back to one of my favorite semi-pro players from the Flint Tropics, Jackie Moon. Okay. So if we're going to be successful GMs and one who fills a roster that is fun and badass, let's set a goal for the season. Let's do this. In Yahoo, if you want to pick a team performance goal for the first time, here's some help. Here's some specific help. And I'm just going to refer to this chart right here. Well, I'm not going to pull it up. I'm just going to tell you exactly. Okay, this is 6 years of data. Just simple statistics here. So these are my winning percentages in my head-to-head category play over a 6-year period in Yahoo. This can all be pulled up in your Yahoo app. A beautiful thing about Yahoo, and I've said this before, kudos to them. I think it's the finest fantasy app, but their historical data on your performance goes all the way back to 2009. I don't know. I believe that might be unprecedented. I'm not sure of that, but it's a wonderful tool out there that they have to check your performance, historical performance throughout fantasy baseball within that platform. So starting in my winning percentages, I just wanted to highlight real quick. So over a 6-year period, keeping in mind this is when I started playing fantasy baseball in my friends and family league in Indiana, my home state where I was born and raised. And again, this is coming to you live from Alvin, Texas. I forgot to tell you that. So I was invited by my brother to join a friends and family league up in Indiana with friends of his, and I finished 11th out of 12 teams my first season. True story. Now, that wasn't the only league I played in that year. I played in multiple leagues, but I will tell you the most leagues I've played in out of this 6-year category was in 2021 when I had 6 teams. In 2022, I had 3. But winning percentage wise, 2017, my winning percentage across all fantasy baseball teams that I fielded that year, I had exactly a 500 winning percentage. And I think I made the playoffs in one of them. I can't remember. But I had a 500 winning percentage my first year. In 2018, I had a 460 winning percentage. And that was probably equally frustrating. In those 2 years, based on the Yahoo performance ratings, I was rated in the bronze performance rating category. Performance level, bronze. And if you've played Yahoo Fantasy Football, you're well aware, and of course CBS and ESPN platforms and others have their own versions of tracking past historical data and using it to provide historical information and reference for you. But Yahoo does a really good job of it. And I was at bronze level at 460 winning percentage. In 2019, is when I turned the tide. I started getting more serious, putting more information and research into my pre-draft planning and starting to develop strategies and seeing them work. And in 2019, my winning percentage was the highest I've had in that 6-year period at 684. And I won, I think I won multiple championships, but 684. 2020, I had a 596 winning percentage. 2021, when I had 6 teams, I had a 531 winning percentage. And then last year, when I had fielded 3 teams within Yahoo Fantasy Baseball, I finished with a 643 winning percentage, my second highest. So I found what that helped me do is find a sweet spot with how many teams and leagues I wanted to participate in, because at least this 6-year data shows that I seem to do better with that. But now how that applies to what we're talking about today in risers is what you should take from this information that I just covered on that chart isn't how great I am. I mean, I think I'm badass, but it's a humble brag. I'm not, I've said before, I've told y'all that I achieved in 2022 last season the diamond level in the performance ratings in Yahoo. And it's not something made up. It's something you can show. It's not something you can buy. You can't buy little I don't know, little coins or whatever, like on some game sites and stuff, and make yourself good. You have to go out there and actually perform well. But you might take from that the winning percentages of my teams in the past 6 years, you know, the margins between a good team and being a championship team are small. I mean, my rise to the top diamond level performance means you're in the top 10% of all Yahoo fantasy baseball managers. It's a humble brag. I mean, it is what it is. But in last year, I achieved that level. I went to gold in 2019 with that 684 win percentage, and went to platinum in 2020, stayed in platinum in 2021, and I had a serious goal for last season of achieving diamond level. And I did that by posting that 643 win percentage. But that should tell you how tight the margins are between being good and being great. It's kind of like, I'm going to go off script here for just a second, is it reminds me so much of the analogies of how tough baseball is to play and how special great baseball players really are. Because the level of success in baseball, the margins between being in the minor leagues and being a Hall of Famer aren't that far off. I mean, when you figure in the old days when batting average was a big statistic, and it still carried weight because of its legacy importance. But just think about that, how you can be a Hall of Famer if you play long enough and just you're successful 30% of the time. I mean, 3 out of 10. Lifetime 300 hitter, you're probably in the Hall of Fame. So I just wanted to explain that to you so you don't have to think, hey, this is out of my reach, or I can't. Look at those, listen to those percentages. You can do this. And the margins are really, really close. Join my podcast league this year and you'll see. You'll see how close it is between whatever level you're playing at and what level I play at, and it'll give you a great bar, I think, to compete. And if you're already a badass, we'll bring your badass over to our league and let's get it on, So the margins are small, and these are all those winning percentages were all based on 12-team standard 5x5 head-to-head category leagues. That's all that was based on, because that's all I played and play in Yahoo Fantasy Baseball. Now that 500 winning percentage, I guess that's a good goal to have this year if you're out there and say, hey, 500, look at what Rudy did. Hey, if I do 500, right around 500, I'll be good. And yeah, you're probably right. I mean, you'll probably be good and you'll probably make the playoffs, because in a standard head-to-head league, we have playoffs. That's why I love head-to-head. Say what you want about head-to-head out there, folks. Head-to-head has playoffs. Roto's great competition. I get it. I know that there's many more variables in the head-to-head competition, but that's what makes it exciting. That's what makes the competition intense, is those variables, those intangibles of head-to-head. And because we have playoffs, and I just can't stand the fact that I play Roto all year and I don't have a playoff. I got to have playoffs. So if you have a 500 team and that's your goal and you meet it, you'll probably make the playoffs. Because 6 out of the 12 teams in a standard league are going to make the playoffs. So if you finish 500, you figure you have a good chance of making the playoffs. So you can be one of those you can be one of those teams that make the playoffs year after year after year and exit in the first round or the second. But anyway, early. So anyway, 500, and you'll probably make it. But to become a champion, I dare say a BadAzz, your goal should be more near 600 instead of 500. So if you're going to set a goal, and I'm talking this year, this season, and you need to set goals that are, one, attainable. I'm not going to go into all this, the tiers of making goals, goal setting and decision making, whatever. But they're helpful to apply even in fantasy baseball as a manager. And that is to make sure that those goals are you deemed achievable, but a challenge to achieve. Make it difficult. Make that 600 winning percentage, or at least in the high 500s, in the high 500. But I suggest 600 winning percentage, because if it's important for you to achieve a high level in Yahoo performance ratings, then your goal should be 600 this year. You can do it. If I would have had a mentor 6 years ago that would have gave me the information that's out there from my analytics department, thanks, shout out to CBS Fantasy Baseball today, and shout out to Fantasy Pros out there. The analytics department, and then my curating of the draft board with my other factors, using backdrafting as we talked about before, these BadAzz goals can be met. You could achieve, likely in 2 years, the diamond level performance, which would mean you're in the top 10% of all fantasy baseball players, managers. So shoot for 600. Shoot for 600. It's something you can check along the way. It's basically in categories league, simple as it's 5x5, so your weekly competition is on 10 categories. 600 is winning on average every week 6-4. You win 6-4 on average, and you'll be you'll be a top 10% player in no time at all. So break it down to Tupelo. So to go a little bit even more in depth in setting goals, and maybe more important, is assessing how you are doing in season with attaining those goals. So make sure that when you set those goals during the season, whatever tool you use to track that, just every once in a while, go back and look at how you're doing week to week, what your winning percentage is, and see if you're playing at competing at a level that you want, that is going to allow you to attain those goals. Understanding, I think something that I think was very important to me getting better too last year was my preseason preparation included going in and looking at average scoring ranges in each of the 10 categories that your team is going to compete in to decide your team winning percentage. And what it should help show with, if you do this work, is it'll quickly draw on your strengths and weaknesses throughout the season. What I mean by that. So there's 5x5 category scoring. You have 10 categories that you're competing against your opponents weekly, a different opponent each week. So your goal is to win as many of those categories as possible, because your scoring and your winning percentage and winning that week against your opponent is all based on those 10 individual categories, they represent a value of 1. Either 1 loss, 1 win, or 1 win, 1 loss, or 1 tie. So in those 10 categories, there's 3 outcomes to each one of those 10 categories each week. A win, a loss, or a tie. So you could win 10-0, you could lose 0 to 10, or anywhere in between. Is split the 10 categories. What I'm talking about is to track during your season. What I did in 21 that helped me a lot in 22. During 21, I started tracking weekly what my scoring was, because that's not something that I'm aware of that Yahoo has a tool or is embedded or tracked within their app. But I would love them to, maybe after learning the value of this, maybe send a message to them that they might develop something like this. And what I would be talking about is trying to identify strengths and weaknesses. So if you take your 10 categories and you look at each individual score from week to week, you start developing an average. Now, it's not going to mean as much when you have a small sample of about 3 weeks into the season. But I assure you, about 5 or 6 weeks into the season, it will start becoming a really good assessment tool for you in really understanding where the sweet spots are. The average scoring ranges in each one of those categories is what I asked myself in 2021 is, where are my strengths and weaknesses? I think I know just by looking at the data of competing each week. But until I started tracking that in a report, kind of a spreadsheet type thing, where I could see it, and then start developing enough data during the season to average that out and it start meaning something to me. What it started meaning was I started understanding what scoring ranges I needed to be in this particular league, because it's unique with each league because your opponents are all different. But within that league thus far, to be able to win, you've had to score in said range for each individual category. The sooner you understand your weaknesses, the sooner in season you can use the waiver wire to turn them into strengths. And that's a big key component. And I thought I'd talk about when you're trying to find risers and those that will help you. You really need to understand where you're at first. It's kind of like land navigation in the Army. If you don't know where you're at to begin with, there's no hope to navigate. You have to know where you're at. This is a helpful tool to use, a simple one that can help you start developing a real assessment within your own particular league. How much more detailed and effective can you do than do some of your own research within your own league and your season? But you'll write those down and see those readily, those strengths and weaknesses, and you can address them and move swiftly during in season at improving your roster in areas that quantitatively and qualitatively you can say through your assessment during the season are fulfilling a weak area, and it should improve your team and your winning percentage. Again, your winning percentage you should see start growing. Wins and losses are one thing, but that winning percentage overall should tell you over the long haul that you're on track and you're tracking. You're moving in the right direction. You're not only focusing on adding risers to your roster, but it's going to help your team rise in your standings. And that's what we're talking about. I will reference the BadAzz sessions, which are learning blocks out there that I have a video, audio and video on YouTube that you can go look at those BadAzz sessions. They're also available on the audio platforms as well, and they're also on the website. And on the website, there's actually a presentation slides you can click through and read if you'd prefer. I think they're a good source to go back there and check out, because the things that I reference now are so much easier to understand if you go back to some of those episodes and understand some of the basics, especially if you're a new player, especially if this is your first year. Take your BadAzz self back to those BadAzz sessions, and these sessions ahead will make much more sense. I hope. If not, I'm fucking up really bad out here. I speak about my last, I speak about in one of those sessions actually about my last season performance and those actual averages and I had in each of those categories. And by tracking that each week, I established scoring averages and I could analyze it against my opponents and how effective and what scoring ranges I need to be in. Let me give you an example, like RBIs and runs, because they kind of coincide numerically, usually over the long haul of a season. But when you're in a week-to-week game in categories, what I ended up determining in 2021 was I need to at least score in the mid-30s to be competitive, in the high 30s and higher to be highly competitive. And I did that by tracking that each week and averaging that out, my scores, my performances. And if I wasn't performing for a few weeks in that range, I knew that was something I needed to address. If I'm hitting those ranges and I'm getting beat in those categories by a few points, I'm not freaking out and hitting the waiver wire, making crazy, just making wholesale changes. Now, I'm not Charles Finley of the Oakland A's. Had one of the greatest teams ever in baseball and just started letting them go to free agency. But you got to I'm focusing on strengths and weaknesses, and that's the whole intent. But I found that runs and RBIs, if I was in that high 30 category area, then I was going to be competitive. And when I wasn't hitting that, I need to analyze my roster and where I was projecting that I was going to get that production, and figure out what my move is based on that. But not just to sit there in perpetuity, week after week losing and wondering why you're losing. Analyze your strengths and weaknesses. And I always learn that if you don't set a goal, pretty simply, then you have none. And if you don't have a target, you're going to miss it every time. And that's an old saying, and it's been widely said, but it's very true. So this season, don't miss out on preparing for your drafts. If you've already drafted, don't freak out. Even if you've drafted Edwin Diaz, don't freak out. The waiver wire can be not only your friend, but as I've said before, the waiver wire is truly where champions are born. More to follow in season on that. So risers are what some in the fantasy baseball world call upside plays or breakouts, or I can't even say the S word. I'm not even going to say it. I hate it. Sleepers, that fucking word, sleepers, I hate it. Here at BadAzz Fantasy Sports, we're going to strive to make things less complicated and give you helpful stuff to win your league. I don't pronounce now or ever to be the best at anything and the greatest mind in fantasy baseball, but I have performed well as a player, and now I'm trying to pass that on to y'all out there, and hopefully have you come out here and join this great fantasy baseball community, because that is what is exciting. Yeah, I got another message out there from my friend Aziz. That was cool. So he's saying that in his rookie year was 2019, placed second that year with a 640. Very good. But since then, never placed above fifth. Guys in my league have been playing since I've been born. Oh, my God. Yeah, hey, I feel your pain. But the good thing about competing against good competition is that's why that winning percentage is kind of important. Because let's say you're in a league, and I'll use Yahoo, and I'm getting off track just a little bit, but I want to engage one of my listeners out there. When you're playing in a league, especially, I'm referring to Yahoo, they rate each league. And I'm sure if you've played for a while on Yahoo Fantasy, then you're aware of this. But your league is rated, and I don't know the algorithms of any of these things. The individual team manager ratings, performance ratings. There's on the website. They give some general information, but essentially, I know they focus the algorithm to determine those ratings and scores primarily on the current year and the previous year, but include, to my knowledge, all the historical the data back to 2009. That's my understanding of it. So winning percentage is important, because if you're in a league, let's say with a lot of higher level players, that league may be rated platinum or even, and I've played in this league last year, a diamond rated league. And I think in that 12-team league, 9 of the 12 teams were diamond level players, 3 of them were platinum. So I played in a many different levels of leagues, and let's have fun. Friends and family leagues, let's admit it, that's the most fun of all of them. I mean, who don't like kicking the ass of your friends and especially your family members? But no, really, honestly, friends and family leagues are just absolutely fun. Getting together, doing live drafting is absolutely the pinnacle, It's the orgasm of fantasy baseball, in my opinion. So get out there and do that. So here's a profile of a riser. This is from the mind of Rudy. For batters, the profile of a riser is that they're young, powerful, and they're fast. Sounds simple. There's a lot that can go into this. I mean, you can do this until your head explodes. But besides just saying using your eyes and your ears, either watching TV, watching streaming baseball, or however you're watching baseball, it's not just merely saying for batters, I'm looking for young people, powerful. They look powerful and they look fast, or I hear they're fast. They meet these 3. They're a riser. They're going to be highly targeted on my player board, my draft boards, and my war board, my tiers list, whatever you're using going into that draft. Each one of those young, I mean, that's pretty easy. I mean, youthful by age, youthful in years of service is pretty self-explanatory. I don't have a cutoff, so to speak, of what meets that criteria, but generally, first, second, third year player, somewhere around there generally. Now, power is a different thing. When you're assessing power, or you're trying to determine where you're going to get power in that riser, where they're going to meet that criteria, is what can help you determine some of that is some of your advanced stats and statistics. Now, you can utilize your analytics department, which means you can spend 30 minutes, an hour or more a day or a few times a week to listen to your analytics department. As I say, go have a meeting with them and listen to CBS Fantasy Baseball Today or listen to Fantasy Pros, and I think they will keep you abreast on good information that could fit these criteria alone. But if you choose to do some of your own checking in and research, you can use the Yahoo Fantasy app and a number of other resources I'll tell you about here in a minute. But within those sources of data for power, you can look at stats like from last year, the batter's slugging percentage, or something as simple as OPS if you want to include their ability to get on base as opposed to not getting on base. And usually not getting on base is because you strike out. So OPS might be part of that equation. Maybe the hard hit rate, something I like to use. But there's many others. But if you can come up with some general basis of how you determine power, or where you're going to determine those young profiles with power, you can come up with any number of those. And please share those with me, whatever you have ideas about that, because I don't begin to declare that I know everything there is to know. I'm just telling you everything that I know. So speed, you want somebody that's fast, young, powerful, fast. They have power, they hit the ball hard, they run fast. So we can check that too. You can analyze. You can listen to your analytics department, or you can go look at a player's sprint speed, or their propensity to steal bases, either their team maybe overall or the individual, by basically looking at their history in past seasons. How many bases did they steal? Is there some history to that you can easily pull right up in Yahoo on the fantasy platform? But also you can research some of this information and develop your own criteria for identifying or profiling your own risers, but using some shape or form of that. And with pitchers, it's the first one, or some of it's the first two are the same: young, powerful, and the last one's different. I call it durable. So 3 things I want my pitchers to be are young, powerful, and durable. Now, besides just the eye test of going out there and watching a bunch of baseball games, watching spring training and see what they're looking like, which I do. I love watching baseball. But I can't watch every pitcher pitch, and I certainly can't watch every batter bat. But I can look at some statistics from last year, or maybe even some statistics in real time during spring training with pitchers. And if I'm looking for power, I'm talking about pitchers. I like pitchers that strike out batters a lot. So a high strikeout rate, whiff percentage is another statistic. I like that one. I like the K9 is a pretty simple criteria to use, is how many strikeouts per 9 innings they pitch. If you're testing durability, I think a durability on pitching is very important. If you don't know that, go look at the injury report or the injuries that have been reported during spring training. How many pitchers have been injured already? But so young, powerful, and durable. Now, what kind of statistics or what kind of things can I do to mitigate risk on drafting pitchers who may not pitch enough? And I like pitchers that post. I like pitchers that are not injured. I generally like pitchers that are not coming back off injury, with the exception of Tommy John. but that's just my take on it. I like pitchers that are young, powerful, and that are posting. They're going out there and pitching a high dose of innings each by game and by season if you have more data. But a lot of times young pitchers, they don't always have a big, long track record. Those that do, those pitchers that do have long track records with good numbers in ERA, WHIP, and strikeouts are already very high up on the draft boards. And they're good to have. But you're going to pay a high draft pick. So look for risers in the pitching environment as well as the batters, because they're out there. You can use some advanced stats sites to do some of your own research. I think Baseball Savant, StatCast, there's a bunch of others. You can go out there and research and give me some feedback if you think there's something out there that maybe I don't mention, bring it out there. Yeah, and I agree with the listener out there about Yordan Alvarez. I remember the first time I saw him swing a bat for the Astros. Oh my gosh, just a remarkable swing. But I will note that he is always, as far as I think, even when he was with the Dodgers organization before he came over in that now infamous trade. Infamous if you're a Dodger fan, because I can't remember who we traded, but or the Astros traded, but the Astros traded a relief pitcher that's not been in the league. I think he was only in the league maybe another couple of years. And for Yordan Alvarez. And I will tell you a real quick thing out there, because listeners are worth gold to me out there. People willing to take their time to listen. I'll tell you something about Yordan Alvarez that you may not know. Now, I heard this listening to a radio program a few years ago. And it was told that when the Houston organization contacted the Dodgers, what was that, in 19 when he came over? Or was it 18? Whatever year they brought him over, they contacted the Los Angeles Dodger organization and apparently were trying to work out this trade. Or it could have been vice versa. It could have been actually the Dodgers reaching out, because I think they wanted this reliever because it was late in the season, just before the trade deadline, and I think they wanted to shore up or help their bullpen. Gosh, I can't remember that guy's name. That's almost funny. I can't even remember the dude's name. But anyway, so when the Astros organization told them that they wanted Alvarez, I believe they said the Dodgers actually contacted a player in their organization in a farm system named Alvarez and told him he'd been traded or whatever to the Astros, and it was the wrong Alvarez. There was apparently another guy named Alvarez in the Dodger system, and they thought the Astros meant another player. So what I'm thinking is that the Dodgers really missed the boat on Yordan Alvarez, because they didn't even think he was the best Alvarez in their system. So they probably didn't even know he existed. But that's how he came to the Astros. And yeah, he has a wonderful swing, and he's a really great fantasy player, baseball player, to be sure. And that's why you'll find him being drafted in the first round this year, because he is a great player. So how many risers do I need on my roster? I bet you're asking, or you might be thinking about that while you're thinking about going to sleep. But that's a good question. It's a tricky question, too, because, I mean, who in the hell knows that? I don't know that. I don't know the magical answer to that. But I will help you with what I have found. But as many as many as your risk tolerance will allow is my suggestion. And I know that sounds like I'm selling you some kind of fucking mutual fund. You know, your risk tolerance. It depends on your risk tolerance. Is your risk tolerance high, medium? Okay. I can't determine that. But I can tell you this, that I can rationalize it by telling you that based on last season, when I finished at a 643 winning percentage, my roster turnover of all my teams that I was playing, because I went back and did this as an after-action review at the end of the season, my turnover on my rosters was 50%. From the draft, I'm sorry, I'm rubbing my nose because it's fucking itching. 50% from the draft till the end of season turnover. So my theory is, with that kind of turnover, I can consider drafting risers at least up to a 50% rate. I mean, if you figure your turnover during the season, you're going to have fun, you're going to be competitive, and that at least my experience over the course of 6 years is that I've experienced this consistently year to year, this 50% turnover. It's like the divorce rate, you know. Either that or it's just the easiest number to remember. I think it's higher than that. But anyway, but 50%. So be bold out there. Set a goal that you're going to have risers prominently on your roster. Because you know what it's going to be? It's going to be more fun. It's going to be more exciting. Let's talk about the career year. The career year is a big thing that you'll hear people talk about career years in the fantasy baseball podcast world. Many of the experts are skeptical of fantasy baseball players that are coming off their career years. But for me, this is what intrigues me about risers. They tend to defy the projections, one way or the other, meaning up or down. That's why there's inherently more risk. And because it's my contention that generally risers cannot have really a career year yet, or can they? We really don't know. When you're a young baseball player and you're thinking as a fantasy baseball manager, whether you want to consider that player a riser and highly target them in your drafts and make them serious priorities in your draft, then you need to believe that player is on the rise, and believe that that player's still going to outperform their projections, because really, if you think about this, how do we know it's a career year? I mean, now, if you have a lot of statistical data over a long period of time, that's another subject. If you have a player that has a deeper, longer list of historical data, and then all of a sudden you have this spike, well, yeah, that's just that's a career year. Certainly, that'd be my definition of it. But would you rather have your roster filled with youthful upside or the old steady eddies? I mean, again, you are the general manager. The naysayers are going to emphasize the risk involved with some risers, or they'll even call them bust. They'll put them on their bust list or potential bust. And they are right. They are potential bust. I think every player that takes the field has potential bust. But in the words of my Army buddy, are you going to be a pussy all your life? Are you going to sit there and just, okay, I think I'll pick Steady Eddie again. Steady Eddie. Well, they'll get you probably 500 in the playoffs, but it won't make you a BadAzz champion. For me, a riser is one whose trajectory is pointed upward. So for these players, it's difficult to say whether they've had their career year yet or not. In my assessment, they're on the rise. If they're a riser, they're on the rise. And regardless of the conditions, such as the team they play for, the batting lineup they hit in, the rotation spot they pitch from, I project them to rise above those conditions, even when they're not so ideal. I want those kind of players on my team. They're rare. They're the ones that can win you championships. Let me give you some examples. Bobby Witt Jr., Michael Harris II, O'Neal Cruz, they're on my risers list. That's not a shock to anybody out there that's played fantasy baseball. I'll talk about others here in a minute that are on the list that are not necessarily as obvious. I'm going to target them with vigilance, players like that. In the podcast world, you're going to hear experts project these same players as bust for this season. So opinions are going to vary greatly on young riser types. And that's reasonable to expect because of the volatility in a group of young baseball players trying to survive and thrive in the major leagues. Again, most player draft rankings are based on median outcomes. That being said, I try to find young players that fit my profile. And if you're banking on upside and you want a good portion of your roster made up of these players, then you'll have to draft like it. And the higher you draft a riser, the more risk you take on. So focus most of your search in the middle to late rounds of your draft for risers. I'm not saying they're not at the top because those three examples I gave you are very highly rated this year based on what they did last year, small sample size. And they're, again, given a median outcome on what their projection is for those young players. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Steady Eddie. In fantasy baseball and in the real world of baseball, the back of a baseball card matters. These type players are the pillars of consistency and have established themselves within Major League Baseball as a player who does X, Y, Z and post year after year. It's pretty basic. But these steady eddies, as I call them, can be found throughout the draft in early and later rounds. You should target some steady eddies for your teams, and I'll tell you why. Yeah, they seem boring as hell and during your drafts, but you'll need their consistent counting stats. And you'll need those counting stats in those categories throughout the season to mitigate the effects that invariably happen in baseball throughout the season are the ups and downs. The ups and downs of pitchers and batters, that's baseball. So having some steady eddies on your roster are going to help hedge your plays on your risers and taking greater risk with them on your rosters. Hope that makes sense. Michael Harris, too, we're going to use him in this scenario as an example. Many are calling him a bust in 2023, but I disagree. I've not heard any convincing argument for tagging him as a bust. I think most experts are just not interested in risers unless they come at a Walmart price, basically. I found no red flags that Michael Harris will be a bust. Now, the point is I think a lot of experts just don't want Michael Harris because where he's being drafted this year, which if you're going to draft him, you're going to have to expend a third-round draft pick probably on him to get him on your team. Now, does that imply more risk? Of course. And he's one of my risers this year. But he is not one of the risers that I expect to have a drastic difference between their preseason projections and ranking and their in-season performance and ranking. It's going to be a smaller difference, but I believe they're going to break that they haven't. I'm banking on that they've not had their career year last year, so to speak. I believe that's why he's going in the third round, honestly. But I like him because of those reasons. While being drafted this year in the third round, it's a high price to pay. But if you believe he's a riser, then you believe and this is including some research, putting something into it, besides just, hey, I believe he's a riser. I believe. You believe with research that, or some amount of qualitative research that he's going to exceed the projections, those median projections that the player rankings are showing him at. If you're hearing the experts call him a bust because they believe he will not repeat last year's performance, then you're playing checkers instead of chess, in my opinion. Because there's little risk to declaring a young riser to fail. The odds are in your favor. Oh, I think he's going to be a bust. He's not going to do that great. There's no way he's going to do what he did. Or more than likely he won't. Well, that's an easy one to throw. That's a softball to throw out there. But because there's little risk in declaring a young riser to fail, it's in their favor to say it. But if you're going to be a champion, you're going to have to take risk. Look at what I'm saying to you. If you're going to be a champion, you're going to have to take risk. So where do you take those risks? No doubt, taking anyone like Michael Harris in the third round as an example in your draft is important. And because of that, some fantasy managers will not risk. They just won't take that risk that early. I will take that risk because Michael Harris, in Michael Harris's case, drafting him in the third round does not mean I'm counting on him to exceed greatly the Yahoo projections, the median projections. I just need him to at least meet his projections, play at that median projection level. If he finishes the season meeting projections, that draft pick will not have been a failure. Not at all. Because Michael Harris will have been a steady Eddie on my roster for this year. Maybe not the riser you had hoped for to take that little bit more of a bump. And from the third round, there's not a whole lot of bump you've got left. But if you can perform at that projected level consistently this season, then you have not failed in taking a risk on that player. You have just fielded a steady Eddie. So you still have to try to find some risers to make up your roster, and you can certainly use a waiver wire, and we'll talk about how you can find throughout the season who those players are that you can add that could be your risers in season. But we're talking about drafting, and in this specific example, Michael Harris or not in the third round. So think about that. What are you risking? The risk is if Michael Harris does not perform at his median projection, then obviously you're taking a hit on your effectiveness of your team. I mean, common sense. While some analysts and fantasy baseball managers look for risers in the later rounds, I do as well, but I'm going to go deeper But if you go deeper in the draft, I'm saying your riser draft selections, if you go, I should say, higher, the risk to incur exponentially more risk that player will be a bust, so to speak, and fail to meet their median projections in the preseason ranks. The further you go deeper in the draft for those risers, understand that in my theory, my idea, the risk factor actually goes up, that the chances are that they will fail. So I think some people have the opposite idea, that as risers, you find these young high performers that are moving up the draft boards a year or 2 years after they come onto the major leagues, that there's a feeling that they become overpriced very quickly. So then it would be easy to assess, well, if I deem them as a young stud, I believe they're going too high in the draft, it's going to cost me too high of a draft pick to pick him. I just don't believe in investing that much in that with that much risk. But I just think they're failing to understand that they do not have to perform that difference between their preseason rank and their in-season performance. They don't have to differentiate as much when they're drafted that high as those that are drafted in the lower rounds. Certainly, if you're taking a flyer on somebody, a real high-risk pick. But that's why we play the game, and taking risk is fun, especially when it's not going to cost you the mortgage on your house or the car in your driveway. Of course, always remember when we say risk, people cringe and just kind of don't want to take any risk, because just the mere presence of the word scares people off. But just remember, great risk comes with taking great risk. You unleash great potential in fantasy baseball, and the rewards are high for those who take those risks. Risers, like steady eddies, are laced throughout the draft. So go get some of them risers. They're littered throughout the draft. I will tell you an example of a steady eddy that I target, or have in the last few years, is Anthony Rizzo. Anthony Rizzo, you can pick up last couple years, probably, and this year you can pick up in the 11th or 12th round. But he's a steady eddy that's going to post, and he's going to make his projections, his median projections. He might exceed them a little bit, but you can count on turning the back of the baseball card over on Anthony Rizzo, and you can tell that he's steady eddy. So there's a good example. If you want to be competitive, you can be a 500 team and likely make your playoffs, like I said before. But to be a champion, you're going to need to perform at a much higher level, as we talked about before, maybe about a 600 winning percentage clip. And that will get you in the category where you're performing at a level that can make you a champion. To climb that fantasy baseball mountain, you're going to need to take on risk, bet on upside, and add risers to your roster. Regardless of the outcome, you're going to have fun. And ain't that why the hell we're playing this damn game anyway? Because you're going to have added a number of exciting players to your team. I mean, that's just a fact. And I'm going to give you some examples here, and let me give you some specific examples. I'm going to show you some people that I think highly of, and just had to give me just a second here. Click on over here, and I'm going to, well, you should see another screen here. Nope, not that one. Not that one. Voila. Voila, that's not it either. Okay. There we go. Okay. So we will pull up this list. Okay, and on this list are some high targets here, or risers, I would call. Now, you can probably tell, you can see a different shade at the top, like a little bit darker or golden shade of yellow. And these players are obvious no-brainers. They're not like coming out of the woodwork, the new sensations. They've been around a little bit. They've established some history. They have a record, but they're risers and people I want to target because I believe they're continuing to rise. I believe that their career years have not happened. I believe they'll exceed their preseason projections. You can see those names from Julio Rodriguez down to Alek Manoah. Now, on down this lighter color shade of players are still high targets. I mean, they're going to translate, and most, if not all, are going to translate and move over to my tiers list, which will make up my draft board for my in draft decision making. So these players are going to be prominent. So, and there's quite a few of them, and they vary in degree of where they're being drafted. In a general sense, not specific, perfect, but this is somewhat in a pretty much a draft or an ADP order, because Bobby Witt Jr. is going in the second round. O'Neal Cruz is going in about the 6th or 7th round. Gunnar Henderson 8th. Jake McCarthy around the 9th. Taylor Ward 10th. And yada yada on. I think Corbin Carroll's probably moved up some, but all these players are well known, well talked about. There's not one player in this yellow color here that I have on my high target list that have not been talked about to some extent from my analytics department, listening to CBS Fantasy Baseball Today and the Fantasy Pros. These names will come up early and often, they say. So there's many other considerations, but when we're just talking about risers, trying to identify who could possibly be these 29 or so people that you could get on your roster, a handful of them, to make up as much as half of your roster with. So these are generally, too, they fit the profile of what I'd said before: young, powerful, and in batters' cases, they have speed, and in pitchers' cases, they have durability. Not all of these people on this list come without some red flags. There are some. Ronald Acuna Jr. is not without injury concerns since he had his knee, that serious knee injury, chasing a ball down in right field in 2021. What we're hearing is from the Atlanta Braves organization is they expect Ronald Acuna's power numbers to continue to be on the upswing. And that certainly would be good news for anybody who is going to draft him in the first round. They want to see those power numbers resume to those prior to his injury. And I think there's an expectation of him reattaining those levels of performance. And certainly I believe in him, and that's why he's on there. And Kyle Tucker, Michael Harris, Emmanuel Clase, and Alek Manoah, they're all pretty known names out there, but still very young and very on the rise. So you can see from my list here, and to another level, I have these folks highlighted here in blue, and they're still people that I think are risers and will fit into my draft strategy and definitely be prominent in my draft boards and my draft plans. And you can see the list of names. I'll just scroll up here or scroll down, I should say. Is it scrolling up or scrolling down? I don't know. But the list is moving up, but showing players from the bottom, scrolling upward. And there's some of those players. Now, you may look at some of those and come back and write and say I'm full of shit and don't know what I'm talking about. But I believe that these are people that I'm marking as somebody to be on the lookout, and then there's others that make up the list to even a lesser extent, but that's the entire list right there. And these are some other players too that are on the radar, so to speak. Okay. So these are making up my risers. I hope that you'll find that when you're out here preparing for your draft, that you can come up with a similar strategy that puts you right in the competition with your in your league out there. And this is messed up. What the heck is going on here? I don't see it. This is wild. Okay, just a second. What the? Here we go. There you go. You can see me now. Can you see me now? There we go. Okay, so I hope that talking about risers and applying that to your draft strategy gives you some kind of help, gives you some kind of context. Because if you're truly looking for a high-level performance, without forgetting the number one goal is to have fun. For fuck's sake, go out and have fun. That's why I include some of these strategies, like backdrafting. I like using that to give my mind a focus on who's available in the later rounds so that I have that awareness without necessarily constantly scrolling in draft to find people who are coming up. I've already exercised that and worked that so I know who those folks are, where I'm putting those red lines that I talked about in backdrafting, so that I know this is the one I'm targeting for that position. And here are some flags for people that are either before or right after that could be available if that player that I'm primarily targeting in that round, in that tier, if I don't get them, I have some backup plans as far as other alternatives. And I can always obviously go down a tier and find a player I prioritize and move them up. But I hope those sessions and those other videos out there help you strive for that 600 winning percentage. If you don't want to go for that and put that much effort into it, strive for a 500 record. If it's your first year, a 500 winning percentage is to be respected. You'll be in the playoffs. You'll have a shot at the championship. But if you want to up your game, shoot for that 600 winning percentage. I hope that you'll find some of these strategies and processes helpful in achieving those strategies, or in achieving your goals, similar to how I achieved those goals, albeit it won't take you 6 years. Hopefully the goal is 2 years. If you take this challenge, and you want to create a challenge and get the competitive juices flowing on your own, then set a goal of a 600 winning percentage this year and attaining the diamond level position in year 2. I think it's doable. It'd be wonderful to see somebody get into the community and take that walk, see if they make it, That journey will sure be fun, but see if someone within our podcast community in one of our leagues can achieve that level in 2 years, applying some of these things that are helpful. I think would be a wonderful, wonderful testament to some of the very things that I'm spending time tonight talking to you about. So without further ado, thanks for listening in this evening to the the BadAzz Fantasy Baseball Podcast Special Edition on Risers, the search for upside. Go to our website and join that podcast league, please. Follow me on your favorite social platform, and we're going to see you tomorrow night on the live stream, Sunday night, 7 p.m. Central Time. See you on the live stream. Have a badass evening. Have a badass fantasy baseball season. And remember, if you suck, it's your fault. Good night, everybody.